أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي واجعل لي وزيرا من أهل هارون أخي أشدد به أزري وأشركه في أمري كي نسبحك كثيرا ونذكرك كثيرا إنك كنت بنا بصيرا وصلى اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه أجمعين Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to our Sunday discussion circle. I am forgetting, but we are reading perhaps, is it the 11th ray? And it's the summary of the 8th topic. Yeah. And the general discussion has been revolving around the hereafter, belief in the hereafter. And recently, there were certain themes that we had discussed, including sort of the significance of gratefulness about how one finds proofs in their life to live with the belief that there must be another form of creation. So we will start today reading from also Everyone's Home is a Small World for Him. So let's start. Also, everyone's home is a small world for him, and even a small paradise. If belief in the hereafter is not at the basis of the happiness of that home, the members of the family will suffer anguish and anxiety to the extent of their compassion, love, and attachment. Their paradise will either turn into hell, or it will numb their minds with amusements and dissipation. Like the ostrich who sees the hunter but can neither fly nor escape and sticks its head in the sand so as not to be seen, they plunge their heads into heedlessness so that death, decline, and separation do not spot them. They find a way out by temporarily blocking out their feelings in lunatic fashion because, for example, the mother trembles constantly at seeing her children, for whom she would sacrifice her soul, exposed to dangers. While the children all the time feel sorrow and fear at being unable to save their father and brother from unceasing calamities, thus, in the upheavals of this worldly life, the supposedly happy life of the family loses its happiness in many respects, and the relations and closeness in this brief life do not result in true loyalty, heartfelt sincerity, disinterested service, and love. Good character declines proportionately and is even lost. Whereas if belief in the hereafter enters that home, it illuminates it completely, and its members have sincere respect, love, and compassion for each other, are loyal, and disregard each other's faults in the measure not of their relations, closeness, kindness, and love in this brief life, but of their continuation in the realm of the hereafter, in everlasting happiness, and their good character increases accordingly. The happiness of true humanity starts to unfold in that home. Since this too is elucidated with proofs in the Risale Nur, we cut this short here. Okay, I think that might be a good place to pause before moving. So it starts with saying that everyone's home is a small world for him and even a small paradise. And the general themes of this paragraph to me came up as that yes, we experience certain emotions, certain feelings of compassion, love, family, all of these things, regardless of one's belief, you experience them. But whether the existence of a belief in another form of creation, in this case, the hereafter, changes one's experience of those very feelings within this world. So one's compassion and love for their family exists, but then there is another, the same love and compassion becomes something else if there is a belief in the hereafter, um, through through the expression of those feelings in some way. The example of the ostrich is a good one and a very amusing one, I think, to also. And I mean, I think I observe it a lot around me, sometimes in myself, but a lot around, in the sense that people have, we're all living the same life, yet the one way that people seem to always be avoiding the question of asking what anything means is by just sort of doing activities that fulfill short-term pleasure. They seem to be quote unquote enjoyable and they say they like it. But when you ask yourself or others, what does it mean to like something? The answer is somewhat, there's no elaboration on that, but other than the fact that I like it for now and that's why I do it. And without that answer of asking what it means, one just the only way one finds sort of the only act then that becomes is to just keep repeating that. Like, for example, with if let's say someone likes to go spend their day out, walking around, eating, things like that, instead of asking what it means to enjoy that, or to attach a certain sense of enjoyment with what this means beyond that very specific act and time itself, people will rather just continue to repeat that act instead of thinking about its longevity or its meaning in terms of reflecting on what it might represent to them as human beings. So this example of the ostrich is a very appropriate and relevant one, in the sense that that the question of what this means is, which is the sort of the hunter, in this particular way of understanding it. But instead of wanting to think about the question of meaning, you'd rather just sort of turn your head away and continue to plunge your head in heedlessness. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. That's also another relevance. Okay, at the expense of not repeating myself, I would love some help and thoughts from people in the group on things that might have caught their attention. Perhaps like on the first sentence, everyone's home is a small world for him and even a small paradise. Even though the entire paragraph is trying to explain this, this idea of like, what does it mean that it's so small paradise? I think that might be a good point to open up on. Go ahead, Aishanur.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for introducing us to the topic, reading our minds. Just a brief comment on my end. I was thinking about how even from this first sentence here, as a human being, my need for eternity, my need for eternal happiness manifests in every facet of my life, in every circle of my life, however small it is, right? So it's not just a matter of um, seeking eternity with a capital E, but seeking that eternity, seeking that security, that contentment in every fixture of my life. And within, this example that it gives of a family within a home, that to be able to thoroughly enjoy, to be able to not even thoroughly, but to be able to enjoy at all the relations one has, right? Whether it's with close friends or with halakha partners or with one's mother or spouse, to be able to enjoy that means to have that enjoyment rooted in a source that can guarantee it will continue, that can guarantee that it won't just disappear into nothingness. So, just and I can share some more thoughts a bit later as I think further on this, but just from this, small paragraph and this short sentence from the very beginning, it had me reflecting on the fact that I seek that paradise again in every corner of my life. There is no sort of corner, fixture, aspect, whatever you want to name it, of my life in which it doesn't play a role, in which it doesn't kind of act as a foundation for how I experience and undergo that particular moment or experience or situation. It's always there, if you will, and just such an essential part of my humanness, my human experience in this world, uh, and of my own home or corner in this world as well. So just a few brief comments.
Jazakallah. It reminds me of this, we've discussed this in the class before, this mathematical equation that, if let's say you, in this case, it's the compassion, love, attachment, like you love something a lot, you do something, you do a ton of things in life, career, family, invest in things, both emotionally, otherwise. But if it all gets multiplied by zero, then, then it's zero. And so all of that doesn't matter. And that's sort of the aspect what is being indicated. Like, I think we probably can think of the scenario where, like, for example, when one is walking to work or walking in places, I often think about this idea that, is my even step, taking a step in a direction of something doing very mundane in a general life, can this be cumulative? Can this add to something that I can build, like that does not get sort of, let's say, becomes zero? Can this be also something to that helps or adds to or builds on something someone can be doing in their life? And the answer in that moment does become like, okay, if I take this moment to connect with the source of meaning of all existence, then yes, you are investing, quote unquote, your time, your thoughts, your emotions in something that has a security, and that it is also not, you're investing in something that is also not of a material nature, and hence not subject to decay and change and loss. Go ahead, Aishana.
Yeah, I just along that, I guess this made me think of so some time ago, a friend of mine asked me, and quite sincerely was asking me, you know, I guess in some of the conversations that we were having about how belief kind of provides that, or conviction in one source of existence provides that foundation for secure, lasting contentment. She asked me quite sincerely, like, well, what about other people? They seem, people who might not necessarily have this belief or have this conviction. They seem like they're really enjoying their lives out there. And I can't speak on behalf of other people, but I think here this paragraph also highlights a human tendency that I know I have at the very least, which is that I do numb my mind with amusements and dissipations, right? When I'm not conscious of the meaning or the purpose uh of a certain experience, or what I'm getting out of that, or the educative content of that, or how that, as you said, connects me to my source of existence and connects me to the source of meaning, that is filling that moment with compassion, with this endless source of mercy, then yeah, I think it's very easy to fill myself with distractions, right? And this doesn't even have to be distraction in the sense of amusements. I can distract myself for, with busyness and with work and this project and that project. There's no end to it. So, again, I can't speak on behalf of other people, but um I think the sense of being with oneself without any of those amusements, dissipations, distractions, uh reminds one of how empty and how meaningless things can be if they are not connected to that, as you were talking about, to that sense of um not just progression, but this sense of I'll just call it, source of meaning again, if they are not um led with this consciousness of this moment is being purposefully created for me. This interaction is purposefully, intentionally being personalized for me and my needs as a human being, and what I am in need of, and the ways in which I need to develop myself and develop my consciousness of the reality of this world and the reality of my own existence and what it all points to, and the source that can bring that sort of firm grounding uh, joy and meaning. So, it's just, I think, here he's giving the example of members of a family, but like it's not black and white. I may have certain beliefs, right, that when I'm conscious of them and when I approach the world with that consciousness, provide me with a sense of ease and provide me with a sense of contentment. But there are many moments in which I lose that consciousness or I am forgetful of it. And those are the moments in which I do feel that heedlessness, in which I do feel that darkness, in which I do try to perhaps distract myself, right? So it's also a matter of seeing that sort of black and whiteness of two different, radically different experiences, right? And tasting both and making the choice of um, what is the way in which I can taste that paradise that also ends up uniting me with the genuine reality of the world, if you will.
Jazakallah. Yeah, I think this the idea that um, how can you be, how can you experience this small paradise, or I guess in this case, like be aware of it, and you use the word tasting it. Um, I guess that perhaps to me goes back to this idea of like, we don't, let's say, go to school every year and then, let's say someone goes into 8th grade. Their idea to go into 8th grade is that that will become a stepping stone to go into 9th grade, and then high school becomes a stepping stone to go into college, and then all of that accumulation, when you apply to college, they look at your high school grades. When you apply for graduate school, they look at your college grades. So everything feeds into the other. It's a cumulative experience, and nobody goes into, let's say, education or their careers thinking that every year they just sort of start from zero and then come back to a zero, but rather there is a sense of wanting to, for things to build and um, uh, um, I guess take that nothing, there's a sense that nobody wants to lose what they've done in terms of their material or other achievements. And so in this discussion, I guess, as mundane as it is, the fact that, one drinks water, one, does their errands or whatnot, there is a small sense of, or a need for paradise in those acts, in that sense that you don't want them to be useless to that larger feeling that you have as a human being, or the desire that you have of a human as a human being of continuous existence. Like, it feels difficult for me to think that I can bifurcate my life into a life in which one part of me looks into seeking continuous existence, and then the other part of me, just does things for this world. For example, that zero eyes every time they happen, and so the small paradise for all experiences is the fact that there I can have um, an understanding of an act that is actually being invested somewhere by connecting that act to mean, um, to be connected to the same source of meaning, or the same source of existence as everything else. Um, Maybe I had some difficult articulating that. The other point that I thought is an interesting one, that why the author brings up these particular emotions around family. Um, my thought was that if I ask myself, or someone who is not thinking within the worldview of, let's say, a belief worldview, the thing that they find most meaningful in their life, if one has to really think about it, it often comes to people's relationships, and it often will come down to family. Like, if they, let's say, they don't believe in anything, they will at least believe in, you know, a commitment, and they're at least saying that, oh, I'm living for my family, or I'm living for my, partner, or whatever not. So, but the author here is highlighting that even those relationships, um, will, what he says here is, um, yeah, in the upheavals of this worldly life, even that supposedly happy family life loses its happiness. Like, even what you characterize as the most meaningful experience for you will lose its its let's say charm in what it represents to you, if the belief in the hereafter, or the belief worldview, is not informing those relationships. It too will decline. Even, he says, good character, I guess, like, in many cases, like, even people's commitments to each other, out of loyalty, out of love, all of those tend to decline, and that's true. But how does that even decline remain meaningful for someone? And I think that's what is being pointed out to in this case of, the desire for paradise, or the connection that, no, this also means something in the context of my continuous existence. Um, so those are just some of the thoughts that seemed more fresh at the moment. Um, are there any things that, mm, we can bring up to make sure that we have sort of challenged our own thinking, on the topic? Go ahead, Aisha.
Assalamualaikum. So I did have one question actually. I was interested that the text says, it talks about the certain, I guess, like internal turmoil that family members, or that any human being would go through without that belief in resurrection, belief in the hereafter, right? Um, but here it also says that like, and maybe this, you kind of slightly alluded to this, that there's a loss of sincerity or true loyalty, and that good character declines proportionately and is even lost. And so I was kind of interested in that relation, or the connection that the author is making here, in terms of lack of belief in a hereafter with decline of good character, or decline of these specific emotions. Like I could imagine, like I'm trying to think of a mother who might not have a belief in hereafter for one reason or another will nevertheless have that created, given, manifested love and compassion for the most part, for the majority, towards her children. And so, because it's not coming from her, she's sort of a means for that, a vehicle for that. And so I'm wondering how this specific belief affects sincerity, or specifically good character. Um, I feel like that could be a point of contention for many, especially because, um, sort of humanistic tendencies or otherwise, this idea that, one doesn't necessarily need a specific set of beliefs or revelation to have a good character, right? So what is the connection that is being made there by the author, and how is it being made there? I'm not too sure about that part.
I think that's a good question. And I think you said it very clearly, but I might have had some difficulty in getting it. So I'll attempt to offer my thoughts and see if hopefully it's relevant. The first time I read this, I thought about this as um, a part of the human nature of that I guess through different times in life, people can have different reactions to things, attitudes to things. And so there's that, even if someone, quote unquote, let's say, has a belief in the hereafter, um, I guess, it might get too complicated to try and figure this out, but that they can go through times in their life where these things can ebb and flow. But listening to your point, I'm also thinking in terms of the decline of good character in proportion with sort of the belief in the hereafter. I sometimes think that what we generally call as traits of bad character, but let's say anger or frustration or impatience and certain, let's say, behavior similar to that, they seem to me to be to manifest at the moment where man is fighting against the reality that he is not in control. And it sort of is a reaction to me that represents, sort of like the last ditch efforts of obstinacy and egoism, that says that it's still trying to fight for control and of, let's say, dominion over oneself, but is unable to do so. Whereas perhaps someone with a conscious awareness of themselves as a created being who is acting in the name or with the in recognition of the qualities of its creator will not perhaps will be less likely to fall into those moments where their reality is contradicted by what they how they see themselves. And in those moments of difficulty that we all perhaps face in our life, there's nothing in them that is trying to control the situation to make it a certain way, but rather in that moment they acknowledge that everything is coming from the same source and that they too, their own decisions, are subject to the will, the power, the knowledge of that source. And so they seem to accept and let's say not fight the situation and not, yeah. So I find certain representations of character that we might say are bad to come about when there is a conflict or a contradiction that a human being is going through, and that's a reaction, or that's what sort of we see on the outside, is that what we call bad character is a expression of this internal conflict that is going, in their worldview.
Character is shaped by someone's worldview. And as we've been saying, most of the good character comes by having belief in the hereafter. In this, because his author is making a lot of phases of human's life. For example, he was talking about how the sick would feel, how the older people would feel, how the children would feel if there was no concept of the belief in the hereafter. And here, if, as you, the discussion has been going, everyone lives in their particular world, your relations, your family, and of course, if one thinks that they are not, there's no meaning and or purpose to their life, their existence, and let's say it's a wild, wild west kind of situation in the country. There's no law, there's no order. I mean, who worries? Who cares? Arrogance and self-sufficiency. One thinks that they can just rule over everyone else. That's the negative character that develops. Otherwise, if you understand or one understands that there's a purpose and meaning to the life here, to our existence, then of course, then we live by that. So the living by that is the important part. With that understanding of the belief in the hereafter or belief in, the creator of the universe, the angels, so all the tenets of belief. Just to add a few things.
Thank you. It reminded me of how even I guess going back to the belief in the hereafter, where someone is certain or believes that there must be a continuous existence, then there's no sense of like panic in that moment, and I guess in moments of panic and anxiety and worry are also reactions that one is probably not making out of their a full sense of awareness and consciousness, as opposed to someone who does operate with the belief in a continuous existence. They don't find any material physical change in their lives, such as, let's say in this case, issues with family or other calamities. They don't see that, quote unquote, being the end of the world, and hence they have to have a panicked reaction, but rather it's a continuous existence. And so there doesn't seem to me a need for abrupt reactions. And I feel like that also, when someone is more present and aware in that situation, and sees a continuity in it, they're able to take decisions in with the awareness that this is part of something that continues, rather than trying to make a decision that may only for them in their mind be limited to that particular time or space. If there are more thoughts on this paragraph, we can hear them now, or questions, and unless Aishanur wanted to reflect on people reflecting on her question. And if not, then we can perhaps move into the next paragraph. So I'll give a few seconds if anybody wanted to share anything. Right, fair enough. We'll read from Towns Are Also Households. Towns are also households for their inhabitants. If belief in the hereafter does not govern among the members of that large family, vices like malice, self-interest, false pretenses, selfishness, artificiality, hypocrisy, bribery, and deception will dominate, displacing sincerity, cordiality, virtue, zeal, self-sacrifice, seeking God's pleasure and the reward of the hereafter, which are bases of good conduct and morality. Anarchy and savagery will govern under the superficial order and humanity, poisoning the life of the town. The children will become troublemakers, the youth will take to drink, the strong will embark on oppression, and the elderly start to weep. Um, I sense that this is a paragraph that helps us continue the discussion on the connection between the belief in the hereafter and character. Um, this example also reminds me of, I guess, the way that in our society people play on this fact, perhaps, in the sense that whether you are online or you're in a store, or there are many examples where they're like, okay, now you only have 2 days to buy this at this price. After that, it's just like some sort of like deadline, and there's a ticker at the top of your screen. Or you go to an event and there's limited quantity of food, and you see people sort of go crazy, and they are in many ways representing some of these qualities or behavior of selfishness, of deception. Anyone will do anything to try and get what they need to get. And it's interesting that it in a timed environment, in a limited environment, that's the way that someone thinks that they can, that's the best way to operate or survive, as opposed to if there was no such time limit, people's behavior changes. So it's interesting to me how, if one does feel like this world, or not feel but believe and determine that no, this is it, you just enjoy your life and then you die and no one knows what happens, then you also live with that limited and urgent and panic and anxious sense, in which, yeah, in order to make the most of it, nothing should um, nothing should be able to dictate or limit what that extent of your enjoyment and pleasure that you're seeking should be, as opposed to someone living with an awareness of a continuous existence. You're only then spending your efforts and time that help you live continuously with that awareness, instead of a yeah. I think that's, as I'm talking about it, I think this is an interesting point that I'm thinking of, is that you want to live with the awareness of continuous existence, and that becomes your goal, not the awareness of just living for a particular time period. So Hale, you can go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. I find this question about living without the consciousness of belief very interesting, and that to Aisha Noor's comment earlier, like, why isn't it that people who don't have this seem to be perfectly happy? And kind of to what you were alluding to, and to what Nursi was saying, in that I think, okay, I don't mean, well, at least I am certain that everybody is aware of this to some degree or another. They are conscious of it. Hence the need for belief. If a human being wasn't conscious of this question, there wouldn't be a need for belief, because belief fundamentally arises out of that question. The need to answer that question about what is man doing here? What's the purpose of my life? What does it all mean? Or does it really mean nothing? And I think these things that people do, as he mentions here, or just society in general, is their own individual response to that question. Maybe because they haven't thought about the question deeply enough, or haven't been presented an alternative view of the world. But these things are fundamentally answers to that question, whether people realize it or not. So for example, if I go and say, I'm going to go drinking because I want to enjoy myself, it fundamentally arises from that need to sort of be content, or feel contentment, or feel to like sort of relieve some sort of anxiety or that I have about the world. I mean, that's why people go drinking. To one extent, it's a social aspect, because people are sort of maybe alone or feel lonely, which, in belief you don't, ideally. And then the idea that, they are sort of dissatisfied with life or dealing with sort of the burdens of life in their perception. So that's another reason why. And so people fundamentally answer this question all the time, but they just, whether people realize it or not, we all do it. We all sort of find placeholders that we think are adequate, and we may not be aware that we're actually asking that question. But it's fun. It's not like let me put it this way. I guess the question is always there. Like nobody. It's not like there's a process of, I have to learn how to ask the question, or what is the. It's human. It's fundamental. It's you can't, like, the question isn't some sort of like externally grafted onto the human being. It's already there. There's no, it's already arises out of some sort of human need to make sense of things. Hence why people do things to feel fulfillment. The most common thing people do is to get a job they feel fulfilled in, that they feel like is contributing to something larger, to society, or maybe something, as Norsi points out, to family, because there's always this human need to make sense of something, to find the meaning in things, whatever that meaning is for people. The issue, though, is that then, without belief, those things are fundamentally temporary or transitory, and hence why people need to find multiple different avenues, and it can sort of lead to the corruption of the soul, as he points out, because no thing in reality is adequate to the human being in answering that question. Because if the question could be answered within the world, like if the solution were in the world in and of itself, then I don't know why I would be asking the question, because it would be so obvious to me then. Like, why are people so hung up on this question for thousands of years if the solution were so obvious within the world? Like, somebody should have found it by now, but it's not, because it's not there. And people will explore every possible option there is, and yet no one will find it because it doesn't exist in the world. So those are my thoughts on this.
Thank you for sharing those. I think one of the points that you're making is I relate to it in the idea that the question, so it is fundamental, as we learn here, to start by asking the question or questions, and the nature of the questions that are being asked in this situation of what something means very fundamentally, or why am I doing this, they are precisely difficult to teach because they are not taught. Like, nobody knows them from having learned them, but everybody finds them with the ability to ask them, and so they become, no. And I think I find that to be quite true, that if these are questions that one finds them with, then it's very difficult, if not, maybe very difficult, I don't know if impossible, to teach someone a question that they already have. And in this case, there's also the counter reasoning is also interesting. And if I ask myself too of things that I decide to do, why am I doing this? If I find myself not having an answer that seems clear, that seems, primarily clear and simple and easy or comprehensible, then if that's not the case, then it definitely goes into, I don't know why I'm doing something, and and it can be taken as something that I'm, avoiding or covering up because I don't know what I'm doing, why I'm doing a certain thing. That act in and of itself becomes, I guess, a way to veil oneself from the questions of meaning, I guess. Anywho, anything else in this paragraph? I think it was interesting to read about these two types of attitudes, and anarchy and savagery will govern. Yeah, this sort of, it's, as I said, like it reminds me of all these times where, like, I remember to the beginning of the pandemic, on when people realize that there's a pandemic and things are going to be closing, the the behavior that we see in man when they say that, oh, first of all, that things are ending, that there's some sort of like hard full stop after which nothing will cease to exist, that brings out some certain of these qualities of anarchy, of savagery, um, and of so what sort of an attitude, like why not sort of an attitude where nothing really matters and everything um, is uh, is possible, and there's no all actions look the same, essentially. um, so, and it's interesting to think about this in context of a sense of a worldview that believes that when that there is a moment where everything ceases to exist in its complete entirety. Um, it also reminds me, I guess, like this will not your conception of yourself as being completely going into non-existence not only represents um, a, a, an attitude that could be ignorant of reality, but it also inculcates ignorant behavior once you are living. I think this is what I sense the author also implying, that not only that the belief in not having a belief in the hereafter is being ignorant of the reality of existence, but it also brings about behavior that is ignorant, or I guess in this case, of comprising of all of these vices and malice. Any other thoughts on this particular comparison? And I don't know if I just noticed this, that the author goes from, I think, the home comparison, then home, there's a family, and now he says towns are also households for their inhabitants. So um, yeah, something that obviously is represented in its part, perhaps is true in the whole, in this comparison. And we can continue to read if other people don't have thoughts at this moment. Okay. By analogy, the country is also a household, and the fatherland the home of the national family. If belief in the hereafter rules in these broad homes, true respect, earnest compassion, disinterested love, mutual assistance, honest service, and social relations, unhypocritical charity, virtue, modest greatness, and excellence will all start to develop. It says to the children, give up messing around, there is paradise to be won, and teaches them self control through instruction in the Quran. It says to the youth, there is hellfire, give up your drunkenness, and brings them to their senses. It says to the oppressor, there is severe torment, you will receive a blow, and makes them bow to justice. It says to the elderly, awaiting you is everlasting happiness in the hereafter, far greater than all the happiness you have lost here. An immortal youth, try to win them. It turns their tears into laughter. It shows its favorable effects in every group, particular and universal, and illuminates them. The sociologists and moralists who are concerned with the social life of mankind should take special note. If the rest of the thousands of benefits and advantages of belief in the hereafter are compared with the 5 or 6 we have alluded to, it will be understood that it is only belief that is the means of happiness in the world and the next, and in the lives of both. Deeming sufficient the powerful replies to the frail doubts concerning bodily resurrection described in the 28th word of the Risale Nur and others of its treatises, we merely make the following brief indication. The most comprehensive mirror of the divine names lies in corporeality. The richest and most active center of the divine aims in the creation of the universe lies in corporeality. The greatest variety of the multifarious dominical bounties lies in corporeality. The greatest multiplicity of the seeds of the supplications and thanks man offers to his creator through the tongues of his needs again lies in corporeality. And the greatest diversity of the seeds of the non-physical and spirit worlds also lies in corporeality. I'm just wondering if we can make sure that we, with the remaining time, just see if there are any points that we have read so far. It seems more of a summary of the what we've been reading, looking at the let's say the fruits of the belief in the hereafter from the perspective of different individuals, the youth, the children, the elderly, and so forth. And that no matter what their condition is and the challenges or their experience of life is, in all of those conditions, the belief in the hereafter seems to be representing the same experience of living with a conscious awareness that whatever that you do has a manifestation that goes beyond that particular moment of in time and space, and that things don't that each and every action has another manifestation or type of existence. Brother Lee, please go ahead.
I am sure everybody took notes of the emphasis in the text on the bodily resurrection. And because some explanations here says, the mirror of the most comprehensive mirror of the divine names lie in corporeality, the richest and most active center of divine aims in the creation of the universe. In the creation of the universe lies in corporeality. All these reasonings are given, but I remember that we, in our classes here, mostly emphasize on the importance of human side, not the corporeal body. We say corporeal body is just the animal side of human beings, but really the feelings are most important aspect of human beings, that we have to look for the source of existence of these feelings. And we also add that spirit is not of matter, corporeality, so it is not subject to death. It means when like body really goes to the earth and rots there, but spirit is not subject to this kind of processes or treatments. Why the author doesn't say that human spirit is very important and the most important side of our existence. I've thought about it. Are we really emphasizing on a wrong side of the matter when we say that the spirit is most important, human side is most important? Then I said, I have been thinking about it since, I joined lately, but Alhamdulillah, since then, what I am hearing here, I understood that the text is about resurrection. The subject of the resurrection is the body, not the soul, human soul. So, if the resurrection of body does not occur, we know that, or doesn't take place, we know that spirit cannot operate without body. Spirit is a kind of feeling only, but cannot practice it, what he feels, what it feels. Our typical example is even a person is born blind, still the person, for example, somebody tells him that I will cure your eyes and you will start seeing, he will die for it. Of course, some people, blind people, I remember speaking to them, how do they feel? They say, we are happy in our existence like this, but these are believing, these people were believers. They don't complain. Whatever Allah says, okay, this is a transient word. That's why they don't really complain about being blind. But if we ask them if they feel like to see really, of course you are grateful to what Allah gave you, because they said instead of eye, our other organs, memory and hand and feelings develop and function instead of eye. It means spirit still wants to see through a means. Again, interesting. So if there was no means to operate, spirit is not really functioning as a created being. I mean, spirit is a created side of human being as well. So, conclusion, the subject is the resurrection. The subject of resurrection is related to the body. That is why, as far as the relationship between spirit and body is concerned, within the subject of resurrection, we have to appreciate the value, great value of bodily resurrection in the created form. I thought, yeah, when it comes to the resurrection, we have to emphasize on the importance of bodily creation. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah for the directing our attention to the main concern in this writing, in this part, of the necessity of bodily resurrection and the necessity that, as you were saying, that the spirit does not experience anything if it does not do it through a corporeal form on its own. I guess it's difficult to think about something that is abstract or in nature, how it would experience something if it wasn't through a physical experience and physical, I guess, like inputs of data in this case. We are almost at time, or at time. Are there any other thoughts that people want to share or bring up from what was also just discussed about the necessity of bodily resurrection, or anything else today? Okay. So inshallah, we can end here and start next week from the same place. Perhaps it would be discussed further in another method. So going to Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.